Good evening to everyone from India, and I guess good morning or good afternoon to those in different parts of the world. Welcome to this, and this is a quick overview of the United Kingdom. But I'm going to focus this short amount of time to give you some insight into the UK and in particular UK universities and how um, COVID might impact students and thereby impact counselors and schools and how you might want to deal with this. So, of course, the UK is known to all of you. It's home to about 6 lakh international students every year. But I should say before I actually move on to the next slide that every university follows a slightly different process in terms of requirements, in terms of the process, and how they might react to different scenarios. COVID in this particular instance. So do take a look at those in detail. 15 minutes is just to give you a short overview, and I'm more than happy to then talk about um, or chat through some of these things on a one-on-one later. Can I have the next slide, please? Great. So what I'm going to do is basically talk about three different aspects. I'm going to give you a general overview about the United Kingdom, how admissions may be impacted for current students who might be wanting to travel back, um, and a little bit about the application process in general. Then, of course, something that's really important to Indian students and international students as well. I'm aware that there might be students, counselors from other countries here today as well. Is something that's called the graduation immigration route. So that's to do with being able to work post the completion of your degree. And then lastly, going to be talking about some important aspects relating to the response that universities in the United Kingdom have had to COVID-19, talking about student experiences and resources. So, firstly, I think I'm going to talk about the admissions process. So, of course, when you're talking about the United Kingdom, I think there is a slight um, perception or misinformation that it is a 3-year degree. That isn't actually entirely correct, and my Scottish colleagues will love me for this, but Scotland actually follows a 4-year degree system, while the rest of the UK, England in particular, follows the 3-year undergraduate model. So that's something that is often misunderstood. So just for your knowledge. Of course, we have different requirements that every university will have. So check individual websites for that. But all our universities in the UK have some sort of scholarships or the other available. When you apply to the United Kingdom, you're applying through the UCAS in a general sense. It's the centralized portal through which students can apply. It allows you to apply to about 5 courses or universities. It's a fairly simple process. And so this comes back to the question, is it impacted by COVID? And largely that's not the case, because what we look for is your high school degree. It's a conditional offer in a normal situation. We look for one reference, some English requirements that might be it can be waived in certain conditions, and then you're looking at a strong personal statement. So it's a quite a streamlined process. Thereby, the application process itself is unlikely to be hindered by what's happening in the world today. We do have some universities who are lowering requirements because of what's happening with COVID, but generally it seems to be unaffected in terms of the application process. Teaching, and I'll get to teaching in a bit actually, but just to say, we actually had students entering the UK, and universities in the United Kingdom were welcoming students even during the fall of 2020. So August 2020, we did have students who got their visas and were able to travel to the United Kingdom. Of course, it's still blended learning, and we work very closely with local governments, and there's contact tracing and so on to make sure that the environment is as safe as possible. But for those students who did want to experience studying in the UK in that sense, were able to do that. Equally, there was a lot of resource that was put in by universities in the United Kingdom to make sure that there was enough flexibility that was offered to the students. Students who wanted to study in their home countries and not make it to the United Kingdom. We had face-to-face online learning, as well as a lot of support that different departments of the universities were able to provide to the students as well. Something that might affect current students or students who you might have interacted with last year. But those who did end up going to university in the United Kingdom and want to come back for the winter break, England in particular has opened a window for them. Um, During the 3rd to the 9th of December, if they get a negative test, that's the window that they're encouraging that students can come back to their home countries, and it'll be online learning from then onwards. So something interesting that I wanted to talk about is the fact that actually the UCAS has said that there's been actually a 9% increase in the number of undergraduate students who've um, who've enrolled this year, and that's amazing. Given the scenario that it is, there is obviously situations that might lead to that politically in other countries, as well as the response that we've had allowing students to enter into the United Kingdom. So I'm now going to move on to something which affects Indian students and international students a lot, which is the post-study working environment. So the UK in 2012, had withdrawn the post-study visa and moved to a sponsorship model. And now, starting from the summer of 2021, we're bringing back what will give students potentially a 2-year option, PhD students a 3-year option, um, which is called the graduation immigration route. So you can actually work and stay in the UK, look for a job for up to 2 years after completing your undergraduate education. Um, and this graduate scheme is not going to be affected by the blended learning process. So there are provisions that are being made for students who might be, needing to study in their home country for a particular point in time, and then move to the United Kingdom. There will be provisions made, and they will still be able to benefit from the graduate immigration route. So this is really important, and again, it in a certain sense, it puts us at par with what some of the other countries were doing. So that's usually beneficial to anyone who wants to stay on and work in the United Kingdom. Now, in moving on a little bit to the response that we've had, like I said, there was a lot that was, done to make sure that students have whatever they need available. If they need online resources, that was there. Largely, we've seen blended learning taking place in a majority of the UK institutes. That means where in-person learning under the guidance of the governments is available to be able to do that. We've had some universities that have allowed for libraries to open under certain conditions, and public spaces to be available to students as well. Alongside that, there's online recorded lectures that are happening for students as well, and a lot of support. So, can I move quickly to the next slide, please? Yeah. So again, I've just picked out a few clips over here, but this is really offered by all the universities really. But there's been a great response to the COVID, in the sense that we've seen a lot of universities set up rapid testing hubs to help students who need to get tested. When you enter the United Kingdom, you need to have a 14-day quarantine period, and universities have been really supportive to allow for that to happen. There's been enough provision that has been made for students to socially distance themselves and still continue with their journey. I think the one question that does come about is the student experience and how that's going to look like. It's not perfect. I'm an alum of St. Andrews myself, and I'll be the first to say that student experience means a lot. But what we have actually seen is students being very creative with this. We've seen, for example, at St. Andrews, there's something called a can do initiative. So rather than saying, this is what you can't do, students have been very creative to allow for activities to take place where groups are coming together, given obviously, working with the laws in place and regulations in place at that point in time. But you can book space and socially distant and still carry out, certain activities. And I've heard of similar initiatives being taken by student groups, alum getting involved, and different societies and clubs coming together to make sure that students, even if virtually, can still enjoy some sort of the student experience. So that's just to talk a little bit about that. Something that I mentioned earlier, but I do want to stress on this a little bit since I now have the chance to do so, is just bear in mind that the United Kingdom is England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales, and there can be some differences in the way each government actually adapts to certain situations. So, for example, the 3rd to 9th December window is something that's being accepted by the English and Welsh universities, but Scotland has a slightly different approach to it, where it's an approach where you might have to get two negative tests, things like that. So there are subtle differences and that are there, and I would encourage anyone who is looking at that to be looking at the websites in detail. There's a lot of information. Like I said, get in contact with the universities to make sure that they can advise you uh, according to whatever the latest rules are. So with that, I've obviously covered what I wanted to say, but I'll just take a minute to talk a little bit about the recent news about the UK now ordering vaccines for COVID, and I didn't have time to update my slides, but I think that does lead to conversations around Brexit and conversations around how countries will come out of the COVID crisis. And I think Brexit has certainly allowed the UK to look outside the EU as far as business partners, and I think that's really going to be beneficial for other countries around the world, including India and other countries in Asia. But also, economies are going to recover in different ways. So hopefully that bit of positive news is something that we all need today. With that, I shall hand over to the next speaker.